Welcome to Fight Club. How y'all doing? The first rule of Fight Club is y'all bad. You watched bad movies when you were younger. I know it now. Now we know. We know who the bad ones are. We know who the bad ones are. Lots of violence in that movie, you know. You guys should rethink. No, I'm just kidding. We got Fight Club. Y'all ready for some Fight Club? Look at this. We got some people who are blue. We got some people who are on the red side. American patriotism. I'm just kidding. It's Rocky, okay? It's more Rocky themed. I realize I'm pretty non-political because I didn't see it till we put the stage up, and I was like, oh, it's a good thing it's not 2024. Good thing, because I was just thinking Rocky. You know, that's Rocky, all right? So everybody good with the fight? We're just going to be talking about fighting. Not between Democrats and Republicans, but between us as individuals and relationships. At the end of the day, though, we were all made to fight, right? Every single one of us, we were made to fight. We fight for the things we believe in. We fight for the things we're passionate about, the things that are important to us. And maybe you don't specifically call it fighting in your terminology. Maybe you call it your pursuits, your passions. Maybe it's discipline. It could be a myriad of things, but at the end of the day, we all fight for something. And ultimately, if I asked you the question, what do you spend your time, your money, and your energy on? If I just asked you that, you would know that's what you're fighting for. That is what you're fighting for. That's what you're working toward. That's what you're looking at. And the thing about fighting is that, right? Fighters go into strict training. They work for it. They put the blood, sweat, and tears into it. They change things about their life to make sure that at the end of the day, that certain thing comes out that way, or they sacrifice things to make sure that they get the prize that they're after. Okay, you could look at diet, you could look at exercise, you could look at mental training, you could look at physical training, but fighters put themselves through things. They give up things they love for the thing that they're deeming most important. That trophy, that prize, that thing. We could look at it throughout everything, right? That's why we don't ever put the value we know it, but nobody really knows, right? The price tag on a trophy is meaningless. If I start, what's the price tag of the Lombardi trophy? What's the price tag of the Stanley Cup? What's the price? How much does it cost financially? Nobody cares because the price isn't associated with the value. The value is actually found in the fight that it took to gain that trophy. In the blood, sweat, and tears that it took to gain that thing. It's one of the in my humble opinion, right? It's one of the issues I see in our society at times, and especially working with youth for over a decade. I saw it as we started to belittle or lower the fight for anything and everything in life. As we started to demean or as we started to shy away from anything that required energy, anything that required fight, anything that required discipline, anything that required pursuit, as we shied away from that, the hard things in life, you see an incline, and we have that. If you don't know it, newsflash, we have a little bit of an epidemic of depression and anxiety, and one of the reasons for that is because I watched it live in front. I watched teenagers start to give up the fight, and then all of a sudden they come to a place where it's like, well, my life is meaningless. And they're wrong that their life is meaningless, but they're right that when they wake up one day, all of a sudden there's no value in their life because there was no fight. And so we keep going through these situations, and that's not a teenager issue. Another newsflash. That's a societal issue. We've stopped fighting for the things that are supposed to be most important in our life, and all of a sudden we wake up one day and it's like, well, nothing means anything to me. I don't feel anything anymore, and I don't care about anything anymore. And it's like, because you stopped fighting for the things that were once important, that you deemed important. And so you're right. There's no value attached to anything because you've stopped fighting. We could look at it a couple different ways, right? You could look, what's your New Year's resolution? If you don't fight for that thing, I could give you a prophecy right now. Here is my prophetic thing. If you don't fight for your New Year's resolution, you won't attain it. I'm a prophet. Nailed it. I could ask you what you're most proud of in life. I could almost guarantee we could go down the list. What are you most proud of? It's the thing that you fought for most, that you sacrificed for most, that you pursued most, that you're passionate about most, disciplined in enough, the most. Those are the things that we're proud of. This idea of a fight, it actually attaches value to something. And if we go back to the question of what are you spending the most of your time, your money, and your energy on, and you just pause and think about those things, those are the things that you're fighting for. And so we're going to start this Fight Club question off with, what are you fighting for? And are you fighting for maybe the most important things in your life? I still look back at Jesus' life, and I want to follow Jesus. And so as a follower of Jesus, I'm like, well, what did Jesus deem most important? And it's interesting because if you know the historical context, there were 613 laws that the Jews had when Jesus arrived. They called them mitzvot, 613 mitzvots, right? There's 613 things that you had to do a specific way in a specific order. I mean, I'm telling you, all don't even know. Someday we'll get into more of it, but I'm telling you, every time they took a poop, they had to say a prayer. That's a true story. Every time they took a poop, a certain prayer that they had to say. And then when they went and started to wash their hands, a certain prayer that they're saying while they're washing their hands. When they sat down or when they started to cook the meal, a certain prayer that they had to say. When they sat down for the meal, a certain prayer that they had to say. I'm telling you, y'all think it's 613 of them. The poop thing was supposed to be funnier to you, but it's fine. I'm still talking to myself up here sometimes. Y'all going to have to deal with it. 613. And Jesus comes up and he goes, and here's the deal. They started to find new ways to debate about things. It got oppressive. It got wild, right? And then finally Jesus is like, okay, forget all 613. Remember, we've talked about this over the first 6 months I've even been here. But we summed it up to 3 things. Jesus says, let me sum it up to 3 things. Love God, love self, love others. And we say that, that's like the way we say it at New Life, that's part of our mission in life, is to love God, love self, love others. But if you look at that, you have a couple things, a couple threads. One is love. Love is a common thread between the 3. But the other thing is it's loving specific entities. They're God, self, and others. In other words, all 3 of these things have, and Jesus is summing all of the laws, all of the codes, all of the principles, all of the values, and he's summing it up to 3 things, and they all have to do with relationship. Every single one of them, all 3 of them, relationship. In other words, if you just get these relationships right, you're going to be really good. You're good. You could almost say it another way. You could almost say all of it summed up is like, if you could do right by God, do right by self, do right by others, you're good. You could almost venture to say that. But it's all relationships. And as we look back, as we start to look at relationships, we can start to look and say, if Fight Club is really about us asking the question, am I genuinely fighting for the most important relationships in my life? When it comes to God, when it comes to self, and when it comes to others. And by the way, I'm not talking about fighting in relationship, because we all like that. Some of you too much. Some of y'all are like, oh, yeah, you fighting in the relationship. That got me pumped up. No, we're talking about fighting for the relationship. Oh. During Fight Club, we're going to look back at the Rocky Saga. We're going to make connections to certain passages of Scripture, maybe learn some basic boxing terms, and be given an opportunity, I believe, to live out the fullness of what God intended in your relationships. And we're going to look back at some of the relationships that maybe you've stepped out of the ring for. And I do want to put a disclaimer out. I know anytime we talk about relationships, there are certain individuals that maybe come up in our heart, in our mind, and I just do want you to know, this is not about re-engaging in every single relationship you've ever lost in your life. There are some relationships that it's okay that you've moved on from. There are some relationships, especially in abusive scenarios, that it's okay. And that there's a line that's been said about hey, forgiving is not forgetting. Right? There's some important things to look through in that realm. But I do believe, even in those situations, that when that name gets brought up, you're immediately thrust into a place where your heart starts to beat a little faster. There's some fear, there's some shame, there's some condemnation, there's some guilt. There's whatever a negative, emotional, mental narrative begins to be said. I believe that God is a God of freedom and that he wants to break some of those constructs down. And even in the next 4 weeks, as we begin to address it and face it, that he would do some only things that I believe God can do as you begin to commit to the process, you begin to trust him in it, as you begin to face some of those things, that we would be a people that would step back into the ring, step back into that ring of fighting for some of those relationships. And if not, even that relationship may never be fully restored, but that you will find freedom in it and through this process. This is my prayer for this series. And today I want to start by inviting you to just do just that. The very first thing in Fight Club is to get back in the ring. Step into the ring. Step into the ring. I have 2 kids. My daughter her name's Eden. She's 7 years old, and my son is 4. He's about to be 5. And I got to tell you, are they in the room? Oh, thank God. You'll know why that's funny in a second. When my daughter was born, it was this incredible moment. You know, they always talked about daddy, daughter stuff. I was like, I want a son, you know? I want to do some of this that we're talking about. I want to box him. I want to punch my son, like, you know what I mean? Mess around with him, you know, on an accident or something, you know what I mean? Or just wrestling, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I wanted a son, but right from the get-go, you know, Eden was birthed, and Sierra had a little bit of complications, so the nurses kind of just whisked away with her. My mom went with her mom went with her. Everybody left, and I'm just sitting here, and they just plot this baby in my arms. And as a dude, I don't know where you're at, but sometimes I was like, I don't know what to do with a baby. You ever been in a moment with a dude, like you get handed a baby, you're like, the neck's just going to fall off. I'm going to get blamed for killing somebody's baby. Like, don't do that to me. Don't put me in a situation I'm going to fail at. And I think in my head, it's like, that's what it's going to be like. Dude, I'm telling you, something happened. It was incredible. Like, it was the most beautiful, mesmerizing moment. They put her in my arms, and she's doing this little cute whimper thing. And from that moment forward, I was like, girl, like, I've got you. I don't care what happens. Like, you are mine. You're beautiful. It was incredible. And the beauty with Eden was that it was like immediately it came back toward me. I felt like there was a deep connection. She loved me. She's 7 years old now, and I'm telling you, she still loves me. She is daddy's girl. If I could be dead to straight wrong, and she's still like, Mommy, you're wrong. Daddy, I got you. Let's go. Like, load up. And she liked that too. She got the attitude. She's like, Mom, you're wrong. And sometimes I know I'm wrong, but she doesn't know right from wrong because she's 7. So I'm like, yeah, you're right, Eden. You tell her. Tell her, girl. It's awesome. But and so when Zion came along, I was like, yo, it was like that last time. It's gonna be like this time. And then Zion came out, and he was just a demon child. And you guys never. He was a rough baby. He was, you know, jokes or not, you know, this is a horrible experience for like 10 months. He was terrible. And it wasn't like I tried everything. And I knew it wasn't me because I already had one successful one, you know, so I knew it was him. Like, it was like, this one's on him. I ain't taking the blame. You know, parents know. Parents know. Once you've had multiples, you're like, yeah, it ain't all the same. I was naive. Nobody told me. Put it in a parenting book somewhere. I wouldn't have read it anyway. Anyway, but Zion, I would try to hold. I'm trying to lay with him. I'm trying to, like, let me feed him. Let me do something. Nothing. He wanted nothing to do with me. It was all mom. He cried until mom took him. He wouldn't let me feed it. He wouldn't, nothing. He hated me. And that went on, honestly, till like he was like 2 years old. He just did not want anything to do with that. He's still standoffish to a lot of people. If you all don't get offended by this man, okay? I don't know. He's his own dude. He's just living his world. It's his world, and we're working on it, okay? We're working on it. But he won't connect. And so I remember at some point in time, he was like probably 2.5, and I remember thinking, am I ever going to have a connection with my son? That's real for me. That was difficult for me. And there was a point in my thinking, if I'm being honest, where I thought, well, if he doesn't want it, then maybe I'll just step out. Something within me, thank God, and we'll get there in a second. So wait. Why would you allow his response to your love dictate your love toward him? See, I always say, like with Eden, she taught me like the Father's heart of God, like the instantaneous connection, the way he feels about us. But with Zion, sometimes I feel like I got the lens of sometimes maybe the action verb of love, when it's not so instantaneous. But what is God's response toward us in these moments when we don't always respond to his love? Maybe I'm not even in the ring when he's standing there saying, hey, I'm here. I'm ready to go. Let's have a relationship. Let's do something. I love you. I care about you. And we're not even in the building. But he's still standing in the ring. And I realized, I said, I'm not going to do that. Listen, this boy, he might never love me. He might never connect with me. He might never show me that he loves me. He might never connect with me in the way that I've seen it traditionally done. But I'll tell you this, I'm going to stand, I'm going to get in this ring, I'm going to stand in this ring, and I'm going to be there. I'm going to show him love in some way, shape, or form, the way, shape, or form that I know how to show him love, to express him love. And I don't care, I'll do that till the day he dies so that he knows he had a father who loved him, period, regardless of his love toward me. See, I know that's a father-son relationship, and you can, there's a lot of things there, but so often, I just want to put this back to relationships across the board. So often, we allow other people's response to dictate our love toward them or our ability to stay in the ring. And I believe that there are times in our lives, there are relationships in our lives where for whatever reason they might have taken off. They might not seem to even care. But there are times where we're meant to get there and stand in the ring and go, I'm here. I'm right here. I can think of many marriages where this might happen. I can think of many parent-to-kid relationships with this man. Again, I did teenage work for over a decade, and I can't tell you how many times. Listen, if you're the parent of a teenager, let me just encourage you and inspire you. Stay in the ring. They do love you. They do care about you. They're just confused as hell with what's going on in this world. It's okay. Stay in the ring. Show them you love them. Show them you care. Keep doing it. Do not let their response to you dictate your love toward them. That one was for free because I didn't do that in the first week. We have this idea of love, and I love it. We covered the prodigal son. Do you remember that? Because that was what I felt like God really showed me, especially through my relationship with Zion. And by the way, we've connected. We found some cool things to connect on, and we have a beautiful relationship, and it's rare and it's unique, and we're still building that story. So, but he still don't let me hug him in public. So, what 4-year-old? Like, what do you mean you got an opinion about hugging? I just don't like it, Dad. You're 4, Dad. I don't like it. Whatever, bro. A little bit, just a little knee, a little one. I love my kids, I promise. But we can look at that. But we looked at the story of the prodigal son, and it's the same idea. You have a father sitting there, and it's like the father sits there, and he waits to see the younger son who said, basically, I wish you were dead. Give me everything you've got. I'm running away. And the father still stands there and still looks for relationship with his son. And we have these stories and these ideas as we look at families, and there's so many of these moments that might seem like dysfunction to us. And I want to look at a story here in Scripture. It's another story of another family. It's from the very beginning, and it's amazing what happens. It's the Abrahamic covenant, which we talk about. Abraham was God gave him a blessing to be a blessing, right? That was the covenant. You were blessed to be a blessing. And you would think God gave this covenant to a family that had it dead to rights, like they had it figured out. Their relationships were good. They loved God. They loved self. They loved each other, and that was expressed throughout. It was not so. Abraham's family was screwed up. You couldn't find a more dysfunctional family. They were cheating on each other. They were stealing from each other. They were lying to each other. They was killing each other. You think Yellowstone's dramatic? This is way more drama. I mean, this is wild now. They were crazy on each other. I'm telling you. And I mean, you can't even get through. I can't even, if I start to tell you details, I'll throw a couple jokes out there of this message, but you ain't going to like them, I'm telling you. But it's scriptural. It's what happened. Abraham went and cheated on his wife. Slept with Haggai. His maidservant had another son, Ishmael. That's how it begins. It begins with, like, okay, God says, I got a promise for you. He's like, okay, I'll figure it out. I'm going to go sleep with this one over here. I told you weren't going to like it, but you didn't believe me. It was dysfunctional. And we get to Abraham's grandkids, and it comes up with this story, Abraham's grandchildren, Jacob and Esau. Y'all know that story? Jacob and Esau. They're as dysfunctional as it comes. They were wilding out. They were ridiculous. Before I tell the story, I'm going to give you 2 quick terms that you need to know. The first one is birthright. Birthright was simply this. In that day and age, it was a patriarchal culture. Thank you. I needed a word. Line. It was a patriarchal culture. And so birthright was super important. The birthright was always passed on from one patriarch to the next patriarch. Without that, and what that was it was the birthright and the blessing. Those are the two terms. And with it always came a blessing. And it was basically, typically, it was 2/3 of the land, the inheritance and everything they owned, or even up to everything, 100%. And they would give everything to the next man, the next oldest man in charge, and he would now rule over everything they've gotten. So you got to think Abraham, by the end of his age, what did he have? He had riches, he had land, he had women's, he had everything. It's the story. Listen, y'all get offended in 2020. I'm like, this is 2022. This life just be moving, it's just be booking. I'm still in 2020 trying to figure out what happened that year. I think most of us are. We ain't getting into that. Non-flacular. Birthright, what am I at? Double the land. So he would give, one man would pass it on to the next man, and then the next man, the next man. That's patriarchal society. That's how it worked. And so that's really important that you know these were both massive customs that had massive implications. And so when you arrive into the story, all of a sudden in Genesis 25, you find Esau is the dude. These two guys were very different dudes, by the way. Esau was super hairy. He was furry. He ran around. They really made a big deal. I'll tell you even more so about how big of a deal they made about how hairy he was. That was a really big, important detail. He was a fighter. He was a hunter. He if you picture like a Viking, that was Esau. Now, on the other hand, you had Jacob. And Jacob was a mama's boy. He liked to cook. He had smooth skin. They didn't get along. I wonder why. They were just so different. They were so uniquely different. And so you have this situation where Esau is out and he's hunting the land and he's out there doing his thing and he comes in from the land and he's starving. I don't know if y'all been hunting ever in your life, but I don't know what happens out there. You're out there sitting in the hunting stand for like 2 or 3 hours. Something happens in your belly. I don't know if the grain looks good, if the trees look good, but something about it, you come in, you're like, I'm famished. Well, this wasn't like a 2 or 3 hour hunting trip. This dude's out there for days, and he doesn't kill anything. Not very good. And he comes back, and he's famished. And so the first person he sees is Jacob, and Jacob, he knows Jacob always making some stew, always got something cooking. And so he's like, Jacob, give me some soup now. I need it. I'm starving. I'm famished. I'm literally going to die. And Jacob goes, you actually going to die? Now, that's how you know you got a bad beat on a bad brother. You know what I mean? Why'd you asking that question? Just give him the dang soup. But he's like, you actually going to die? And he's just like, yes, I'm actually famished. He goes, okay, sell me your birthright for it. True story. You can read it later. Genesis 25 through Genesis 33. That's what kind of caps this whole story. So Esau goes, are you kidding me? You want my birthright for a bowl of soup? And he goes, yeah, I do. So he says to him, well, what? And he's good logic, right? Esau uses some logic. He's like, what good is my birthright if I'm dead from starving? Fine, just give me the soup. You can have the birthright. So that's the first strike, right? First massive strike. But Esau doesn't really intend to give him his birthright because the birthright was given through a blessing. And so Esau still plans on really taking his blessing and his birthright. And we know that because Isaac is the daddy. And Isaac shows up on the scene and he's getting old. And he says he's going blind, and which is important detail. You'll need to know that in a minute. He's going blind. Esau walks into the tent one day. Isaac calls him in and he says, I'm going to give you your birthright and your blessing. Go out first. Go get me a stew. I don't know why he needed stew before he gave him the birthright, but that part I haven't figured out yet. But he's like, go get me a stew, go kill something, get me a stew, and then come back in. I'll give you your birthright and blessing. Now, remember, what was Jacob? Mama's boy. Who was listening to the conversation? Mama. Who's mama looking out for? Mama's boy. Yeah, come on, A plus B equals C, people. And so she hears it, and she runs over to Jacob, and she says, hey, we got a problem. You're about to lose the birthright and the blessing right here, right now. So Jacob's like, what do I do? And she goes, go get me 2 goats. Anytime mama says, go get me 2 goats, don't do it. It's bad, okay? She's trying to stir something up. So that's for you to tuck away for later on. It's good advice, okay? If your mom tells you 2 goats this week, run away. It's a bad situation going on. She says 2 goats. People are like, what the hell am I doing here? Okay. This is going somewhere. Y'all, it's going somewhere. I just got to tell the story, and then we're going to have some good things. I promise. Just wait for it. I like it. Okay, so 2 goats. That's where I was at. 2 goats. 2 goats. So he tells them, go get the 2 goats. He comes back in with 2 goats. Mom kills 1 goat, makes a stew. And then the other goat, do you know what they do with it? They start putting the goat skin all over Jacob. Why? Esau was that furry, people. Esau was super hairy. And so they start putting, literally, that's the trick, because she said if he happens to touch you or reach out for you and he feels that you're smooth, he's going, no, that's Jacob, and you're trying to, and then we're going to heap curses on you. So we ain't going to do that. So we put goat skins on his skin. They make the stew. He walks in. Isaac, the whole time, he's blind, but he knew something was up. He kept asking questions. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And finally, he goes, let me touch you. And he touches him, and he feels goat skin. He's like, oh, must be Esau. Esau! What the heck? What the heck, bro? I can't say hell 3 times in the one service, you know what I mean? Trying to limit my, have to limit it, you know. People are angry about that one. Okay. I know that I'm doing it. I'm sure. Okay. One group of people think this is funny. Okay. We're done with that. So this is what's crazy, though. Isaac feels him. He goes, okay. And this is where it gets really important. This is where it gets wild. Isaac decides, okay, I'm going to give him my blessing. And listen, you might think, well, just because he said it doesn't mean anything. Yes, in this time and day, it meant everything. There was no contracts. There was your word. Remember that used to mean something? Oops. There was your word. And so once the word was spoken, it was done once and for all. There were no takebacks. That was why this whole conniving moment worked. It was like, if we can get you, if we can just get him to say the words, and you're the person he says it over, it's done. You get the blessing, and you get the birthright. And so listen to the blessing. And this is why it was so important. You're going to start to put some pieces together. Genesis 27, 28 through 29. It says, may God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness. This is Isaac giving the blessing. An abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Ooh, look at this line through Esau's lens. Be Lord over your brothers. I got 2 brothers. If my dad ever said this, and this actually meant like the patriarch, I would have been like, may those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. This is the blessing he gives. And then all of a sudden, what happens? Isaac takes the blessing. He's like, sweet, I got it. We good? He leaves. Moments later, Esau comes in. And Isaac goes, what's going on? I already gave my blessing. Esau literally it says that he begins to weep. Isaac begins to weep with him. Esau says this is his response, Genesis 27:36. Esau said, isn't he rightly named Jacob? Because Jacob meant deceiver. He says, this is the second time he's taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing. Then he asked, haven't you reserved any blessing for me? And you know Isaac's tragic answer? No. And if you're putting relationship against relationship at this moment, you can start to understand why these 2 people hated each other. Because they were pitted against each other from the very beginning. The system and the structure, the society was set up for them to be pitted against each other. It was an all or nothing moment for each of them. If Jacob's mom, Rebecca, didn't fight for her son in this moment, he became nothing. He got nothing. He received nothing. And so there's this moment of tension that we're only picking up on highlights, but for years they're battling and they're fighting because it literally is their life. And sometimes we've got relationships that feel like there's a lot attached to them. Not as much as this, I bet. But sometimes emotionally and mentally, maybe physically, we feel like, but it's everything. It involves everything. I'm in an all or nothing situation. What they've taken from me cannot be forgiven. That's what they've been fighting for this whole time. Then he asked, haven't you reserved any blessing for me? And then Here's the blessing. Finally, Esau mourns again and weeps again and says, please give me a blessing, any blessing. And listen to how tragic this blessing is. Genesis chapter 27, 39 through 40. His father Isaac answered him, your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. Genesis 27, 41. This is Esau's response to it. He says Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near, and then I will kill my brother Jacob. See, as I've been talking even from the beginning of the question, what are the most important relationships in your life? Are you fighting through? Has there been a relationship that you've allowed to separate to such degrees where neither of you are even in the ring? We can look at this relationship right here and go, I could almost guarantee it hasn't gotten to this level. Was it all or nothing? Did it come to the point where you legitimately planned on murder? This is as bad as it gets in the human race when one life decides to take another. As Jacob finds out the plan that Esau has planned to kill him, Jacob's response is to flee, and he flees to his uncle Laban's property, and he builds up all of his wealth and all of his riches, basically, if you can imagine, across the river, on the other side of the river, where he feels protected by the water, and he builds up all his riches, and he gains a bunch of wives. Polygamy. Just kidding. It's just the Bible. I told him, okay, not a good time. Marries a couple women, and this is where the story should end, though, right? This is where so often our relationships, this is where it ends. One brother over here on this side of the river, and what? They've made it. They found their way. They figured it out. And I'm on the other side here, and Esau made it. He found his way. He figured it out. You just stay over there. I'll just stay over here. You just stay thinking blue. I'll just stay thinking red. You just stay on your side of the track. I'll just stay on my side of the track. You think your way and let me think my way. Let's just never talk again. But there's no hope in that story, is there? There's no God of restoration found. There's no new life. This is just the same dysfunction we see in every other area of society. There's a term in boxing. Sometimes before you even leave the ring of a fight, right? There's a term in boxing where two boxers are actually fighting each other. In the boxing, the match gets so hotly contested. It gets so difficult that eventually there's a trainer that's in control of this white towel. And if that white towel comes out, it's literally called throwing in the towel. And when you throw in the towel, the fight immediately ends. There's a giving. It's over. The match is over. The fight is done. And then both fighters walk out of the ring. See, this might have been the thing that first initiated the end of the fight, but then you got out of the ring, and the invitation today is to get back into the ring and to pick back up the towel, because maybe there is a relationship worth fighting for. Because I don't believe like every other maybe area of society where we just go our separate ways, and let me just put a little stamp on it. If we keep doing that, in our society, if we just keep going our separate ways, we will live on two different aisles. We will live on two different sides of the river. We will live on two different sides of the track. We will resegregate the country. Politically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, name it. But the God I serve, isn't about just throwing in the towel and getting out of the ring. The God I serve, somehow he stands in the ring and he calls to each and every one of us and says, I want relationship with you and I'm willing to stand in this ring. And then once we fight it out and we figure each other out and then you figure yourself out, I want to call you to stand in the ring, to pick up your towel and to start fighting for relationships with each and every other person that you come into influence over. There's a God I serve that has restoration, that has hope, that has new life, that actually wants to bring life back to dead things. When all hope is lost, when it looks like there is no coming back, God does it. In Genesis 31:3 with Jacob, it says, then the Lord said to Jacob, it's so simple. Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. Go back to the land of your fathers. Where are the keys? We could have the keys come out. I don't know if he's still here. There he is. Everybody give it up for Brandon. Jacob. I know that relationship is totally dead to you. I know you may not have even thought about it for years. I know the last time you heard your brother talk, he was talking about murdering you and killing you. I know you might be scared of it. I know you might not know a lot of things, but I go back, Jacob, get back in the ring. Pick up the towel. I've got something beautiful in store. Commit to the journey. I've got something beautiful in store. What I love about what Jacob did next, we'll cover it more next week, but what Jacob does next is he gets everything together. And he commits to the journey. He gets all of his riches. He gets all of his cattle. He gets all of his wives. It's okay to be deep and funny at the same time. I'm going to teach us. And he commits to the journey. And here's the point. Listen, please. The relationship you're thinking of, it might not be fully restored. It might not be. This one was. We're going to read about that. The relationship you're thinking of, it might not be fully restored. But your ability to get back in the ring, to pick back up the towel, and to commit to the journey, I believe with everything in me that God has something beautiful for you in the journey, in the process. In other words, some of it might not be restored relationship entirely. We might not walk hand in hand like we once did. We might not do the same way it once looked. It might not look the same way it once looked. But I'm telling you, I said at the beginning, if there's a moment when that name gets brought up, there is hatred, there is anxiety, there is shame, there is guilt. God wants freedom for you in that. And sometimes it's about stand up, start stepping back in this thing. Commit to get back in the ring, to pick back up the towel, because it might not only be for them. It might not be for the relationship. It could just start right here with you. You don't need to live with that hate in your heart. You don't need to live with that anger. You don't need to live with that shame. You don't need to live with that guilt. You don't need to live with it. God is a God of freedom. That's what he has for you. He has hope for you. He has restoration for you. He has life for you. Today, would you get back in the ring? Would you decide, I'm going to pick back up the towel? Would you decide, I'm going to commit to the journey that God has for me? And listen, the last thing I'm going to say, if you didn't catch it, we'll talk more about it next week. He says, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. I know we covered this a couple months ago, but ain't nobody going to remember. But what's Yahweh mean? I will be. And I will be with you. Yahweh will be with you. Listen, get back in the ring. Pick back up the towel. Commit to the journey. And Yahweh will be with you. God is, I will be. He will be with you. He wants to walk with you. He wants to see you restored. He wants to see you find freedom. He wants to see you find peace. He wants to see you find love. He wants to see it all the goodness for you. For you. Today, will you just commit to the journey? Will you just say, I don't know what all of it means. You don't need to have it all spelled out. But I'm telling you, it may just be for you. It may be for the relationship restored. The relationship may actually be restored. Maybe not to what it completely looked like before. It'll be different. There was a guy I played golf with a lot down in Florida. He came to our church. He was in his late 50s. But when you golf, you talk a lot. And we did a relationship series one year, and he began to talk to me on the course even about a relationship with his daughter. They hadn't talked for a decade. He knew some of it was self-imposed, the way he said he failed as a father, but he couldn't remember why they completely drifted. It had been so long. What happened that finally made it to where we didn't talk for a whole decade? His response in the moment like this, a similar moment, he finally decided, and I remember him telling me on a golf course, I'm going to just try to call. Let's see how that goes. And one phone call led to another phone call, led to another phone call, led to another phone call. And for the first time in over a decade, he got invited to Christmas, and then to Easter, and then to Thanksgiving. And he ended up finding a restored relationship, not only with his daughter, but had a relationship with his grandkids for the first time in his life. See, I believe we have a God of miracles. I believe we have a God of hope. I believe we have a God of restoration. And there might be something straining between you and that relationship, but God is just going, today, will you just get back in the ring? Would you just pick back up the towel? And would you just commit to the process with me? Because I'm a good God, and I have good for you. And on the other end, there may be beauty in a relationship restored. God, I thank you for this time. I thank you for this service. I thank you for this call. God, I pray that there are just real situations in this room right now, real relationships that are restored. God, I pray that we hear story and testimonies of relationships restored because we, as followers of you, decided to get back in the ring, to pick back up the towel, and to fight for a relationship that we maybe even view as dead. Because you're a good God. You bring dead things to life. I thank you for it. In Jesus' name, amen.